Okay, so what happened to the nation's political economy? How did it evolve um, over time, and how did that evolution affect the institution of the political economy, and affect our motivations for the way we engage as citizens, our motivations for civic participation? So initially, our economy was agrarian. We were an agrarian country. We weren't a manufacturing country. We weren't a manufacturing power. We were an agrarian power. We were a country of farmers. Um, when Thomas Jefferson became president, he bought Louisiana, the territory of Louisiana, in part, in his mind, to guarantee in some ways that we would remain an agricultural society. We would then have all of that land, that newly acquired land, to farm, and we would have access to the Mississippi River and the port at New Orleans in order to ship our agricultural excesses out to other countries, right? But very quickly, we began to develop a manufacturing base. And initially, it was a manufacturing base that was household manufacturing oriented, meaning it was very small manufacturing. People would make things at home. And people would do work at home. So in some ways, the early evolution of our political economy was kind of a twist on an agricultural economy. So you would, in an agricultural economy, you might have your own farm, and you would do the work that you did on your own farm. And in a household manufacturing economy, you might operate much like you had your own farm, right? You would have your land, your barn, and all that kind of stuff, and you would work your land, and you would still care about your neighbor. It was basically small manufacturing, like piecemeal manufacturing. The value system that it encouraged wasn't that different from the value system of an agrarian society. And so Jefferson and others who believed, like he did, that we should have an agrarian political economy so it would encourage civic duty virtues of citizenship, weren't that bothered by the household manufacturing. It was kind of a subtle shift. In Jefferson's view, it wasn't too harmful. In Jefferson's ideal, the farmer who worked the land was free, and he worked in such a way that for the purpose in such a purpose as to cultivate virtue. And it was this virtue that was important to the civic life for Jefferson. Really, and what it was rooted in was economic independence. So the farmer was economically independent, but he recognized how precarious that economic independence was, and he recognized that he needed his neighbors and he needed his community to help him maintain that economic independence. And the small household manufacturer wasn't that different from that. He was economically independent, but he recognized that he needed his community for that economic independence. However, it was when we shifted to a more heavily manufacturing-oriented society that those virtues, that the ability for the political economy to instill those virtues in people began to disappear. And what really made it difficult for the proponents of the agrarian political economy, and what made it difficult in terms of the motivation for participation and the type of motivation for participation, was that in a manufacturing economy, one was no longer economically independent. One instead worked for a wage. One worked for a boss. One worked for a company. And if you worked for another person, you weren't free. And if you weren't free, then you didn't have the virtues, the kind of virtues that Jefferson and others thought you had to have to be the kind of citizen that would be civic duty oriented in his or her motivation. The problem then was the shift in the political economy was a shift towards one that took economic independence away from the individual. So the shift can be most evidently seen in the way traditional success is defined in America. In the early Republican political and social culture, success was defined in terms of the competent, independent, honest, hard-working yeoman who might not become wealthy, but would serve his family, his community, his nation well by living a moral and virtuous life and by doing the things that a moral and virtuous person would do. By the end of the 19th century, success was increasingly defined by becoming wealthy. So not serving family, not serving community, not serving nation, but by becoming wealthy. And increasingly, the wealthy were celebrated for their wealth. The riches gained by competitive success were celebrated. These were ideas that were alien to an agrarian political economy, especially one of the late 1700s and early 1800s. But by the early 1700s, late 1800s, but by the late 1800s, we were celebrating wealth. We were celebrating the robber barons. We were in awe of their wealth, for example. And if you pursue wealth and you celebrate wealth, it encourages a different kind of virtue and a different kind of political participation, civic participation. We'll come back to that.